All right, folks, we are here for your regularly scheduled 8 Ways to. Today, 8 ways to boost your company's value while reducing the load on you. We're all looking for ways to increase the value of our companies, the value of what we can put out there, the leverage with which we can do it. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't mind having less on my shoulders. Today with us, we've got Jeff Rogers, who is the chairman and founder of One Accord, a company here in the Seattle area. Jeff, take a moment and introduce yourselves to the wonderful people at home.
Well, Aaron, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I'm prayerful, hopeful that the information shared will be beneficial and applicable, not just educational, right? Maybe transformational. And I am founder and chairman of One Accord. One Accord really has three different business units within the overall umbrella. And most simply, the way to look at it is we serve privately held companies that run typically in range from revenues from 10 million to 200 million. In the SMB space, that's really S, but maybe some call that mid-market. And we have worked with about 450 private companies since our founding around 2000. And the three business units we have are really mergers and acquisitions and really sell-side representation, helping companies go to market, a private equity group. And through that, we own 7 companies or have owned 7 companies and just signed an LOI last week for an 8th. And then the bulk of our business, which has started out the 450, is the consultative practice working with ownership to build the value of their company for some form of ownership, change, or growth, new markets, exit, so on. So I'm blessed to serve as the steward of the 3, and we have a great team that works in each of those 3, which are individual companies under the brand of One Accord.
So clearly, Jeff, you have got lots of experience in boosting company value. This is your bread and butter.
Either that or adult onset ADD. I'm not sure which one it would be. But yeah, we've had the privilege, a little over 20 years to work with literally 450 companies in that process. And so it's given us interesting insight into what does make companies valuable, right? And I don't know of any other group that both helps companies exit as well as owns a portfolio themselves. So it also puts me in the seat as a business owner dealing with the issues that ownership does, which we may or may not get into in this conversation. But it provides an empathy, an understanding that's different than just a transactional mindset.
Terrific. Well, folks, if you've been hanging out with me at all, you know me. I'm Aaron Schmuckler. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Yes Works. We think of the work that we do as company culture engineering. There are so many interdependent forces at work shaping the way people behave in your workplace for the better and sometimes to your detriment. And so we help business leaders and their teams see the matrix and figure out how to cultivate, how to create the environment where people and profits both rise. Jeff, I'm going to come to you in a moment for your first suggestion about how people can boost their company value while reducing the load on them. And before I do, let me just say to the folks at home, please feel free to chat with us. If you have questions or comments about what we're sharing, we'd love your input along the way as well. All right, so Jeff, it's now time for me to come to you for your first suggestion about how people can boost their company value while reducing the load on their shoulders.
Well, Aaron, if I had one point, we're going to get the 1 point, and the others hopefully will be supporting information. And it's almost redundant as I say this in what you just asked the question, because number 1 overall is reducing owner dependency. And what you said is, how do I take the load off? And I kind of would think, well, those are kind of the same thing, really. And there are things in life that I would suggest at times are simple, but maybe they're not easy. They can be simple and hard even. And So to keep this simple, it would say, what are the core couple functions that can be transitioned to someone else, either in the organization, someone that you might hire into it, or even that you could use on a fractional or a variable cost basis, where you are taking some key functions of that business, and then you are finding competent leadership that can retain with the business post a transaction, even, so that a potential investor or someone looking to transition the ownership of the company can actually say it's going to continue to run the business that's not dependent on the owner. If you'd like, I can provide an illustration, but it's that, what are those core functions? And there's probably three main ones. Let me say that, make it super quick. The revenue side, the operations side, and the finance and accounting, right? Those three legs of the stool. There's other things like IT and HR and legal that are very, very important, not to diminish those, but what's the revenue? Can you get to market what you make? Can you actually make what you say you do? And does the dog hunt that it actually is profitable? Those three things. Well, if someone can sit in each of those three, that's not the owner, value goes up, stress goes down. So
And so I think what I hear you saying kind of inside that is that the company's value is dependent, or at least in part dependent, on the company's ability to function without you as an owner, right? You're not selling yourself, you're selling your company. Does your company function without you?
absolutely. I mean, Aaron, I'm right in the midst of a company that wish I could say their name. It's very well known in the Pacific Northwest. It's been around 40 years. Two owners are 80, and they want to transition out for family reasons and lifestyle and so on. And the biggest question I have as a potential acquirer even is, well, how well will it run with how these two gentlemen that are incredibly well-known ambassadors know the ins and out, the intricacies, the relationships. They have about 80 employees. So yeah, that's the question you even ask. And if you could eliminate that question before you start that process, your value goes up, it literally in multiples. And I have actual examples of companies we've worked with that have literally multiplied the value doing the same business by making those changes.
All right, fantastic. I have a hunch that both of us are going to get a little bit into the hows of how to uh, remove yourself, or how to decrease owner dependency. And so I'll move into my first suggestion, which is one of those one of the ways in which you can start to decrease owner dependency. And so my first suggestion is to push decision making down the org chart. We have a tendency as leaders to want to draw information up. The folks on the front lines of our organizations, they've got information about our customers. They've got information about how our customers are feeling about our products and services, how our customers are using those products and services. And so we try to draw that information up to the level where we are making decisions. And my suggestion is push the decision-making authority down to the level where that information to make good decisions already exists.
But Aaron, that's so scary.
It's absolutely terrifying. The truth is, it is absolutely terrifying. And how we at the heads of our organizations got to have the judgment that we have was by having and exercising that authority and stumbling sometimes along the way. And so this is going to, in almost every case, provide more value than it's going to cost. It will cost, is going to provide more value in the long run than it will cost.
Absolutely. Do you, here's a hypothesis, and it's a bit leading, that I would ask the question, but would you say that it could be possible that the team or individuals that you empower to make those decisions might make not the best decision, or even maybe a wrong decision, but nevertheless, in the bigger picture, it's actually right and better, even if not the right decision. Could
It,
that be true?
I'm not exactly sure what you have in mind. It certainly is possible that they're going to make better decisions than you will,
But
right? They've got,
let's say they don't make as good a decision. It's
okay,
actually not.
yes.
However, it's better because they made it, they own it, and they'll defend it.
Oh, oh,
Right?
so even if it's not the best possible decision to exercise or to execute, the
Correct.
execution is going to be so much better. The engagement, the commitment is going to be so much better that it ends up being a better decision.
Back to your culture question.
What a cool
What
way of
builds
thinking
better
about it.
culture? Right? Even though, so you may look at a strategy as an owner and say, that's a less ideal approach, but they're excited about it. They've come together around it. They'll make it work. And then when it's really stressful, they'll actually defend it versus like, well, it was your decision. That's why it's not working. Right?
I knew it was going to fail.
Right.
Right. Fantastic.
Yeah, I
Well
totally
said.
agree. Hard to do. It's scary, right?
Yeah. All right, Jeff, that brings us to your second suggestion. And by the way, folks at home, we haven't we have not talked about these in advance. So you are
No.
learning Jeff's suggestions at the same time that I am. Jeff is learning my suggestions at the same time that you are. Uh, Larry Breitbarth, who I know as a fractional CFO, says
Yes.
only by making decisions will the frontline employees grow. And how true that is. We don't grow if we're not making decisions and watching them succeed or fail in their own right. All right, Jeff, that brings us to your next suggestion.
Well, and I want to affirm what Larry just said, and thank you, Larry, for that comment. That's absolutely true. And again, you could say, well, it's altruistic to help develop people. That should be one of the purposes of being in business. But even if you were selfish and self-centered, I would suggest it's still the best thing for the business in doing so. So it's not only the right thing, it's actually is better. I'm going to lean into Larry and go that direction. As he said, he serves as a fractional CFO, which many companies can really utilize, and they don't know that exists. They sometimes wait until they want to hire that person as a FTE when they have access to someone that could be fractional, which would likely better suit where most businesses that are in the 10 to let's say $10 to $50 million range. They may need a controller full time and certainly accounting or bookkeeping, but that goes to my second point: is really clean financials with a dashboard created for business health. Now, you can look in the background and see some car stuff, memorabilia back there, and the Lewis Hamilton helmet. And so I like cars, and I'll use the dashboard. One of the companies that we owned that we were able to purchase at a 4 times multiple of EBITDA, and 4 or 5 years later exited for the investors, is an 8 times multiple. And one of the reasons is we created a dashboard that had 5 little dials on it that looked just like radio speedometers. And it took us about 2 years to figure out what were really the key indicators of performance, not only lagging looking back, but actually forward, that would be predictive. And some of that could be in sales, and some could be the line of credit, or it may be accounts receivable. It's different for every business. But having clean financials done by a professional, and then moving to where you can actually have a dashboard that can give the owner and leadership or an investor or a bank or even the management team to say, hey, we've agreed this is what we need to focus on. Okay, here are I say 4 to 5 is kind of, you don't want to get many more than that. That visibility. And if you can then tie it into an ERP system that you're getting the data real time, and you can build that so it integrates, so at any one time you can look at the business and those KPIs, that gives confidence to a buyer, but you're also going to run your business more effectively. So what Larry does, that's not an ad for Larry, but I'm really saying that expertise is probably accessible to a lot of companies they don't realize is available.
And so, one of the things that's running through my mind right now, Jeff, and maybe you have some thoughts about this, is if I've got my eyes on real-time financial data every day, I might be tempted to tinker every day,
Hmm.
maybe too much. So, do you have thoughts about how to gauge the appropriate amount of responsiveness and tinkering in response to this financial data?
I'm going to use just as a little analogy, Aaron. If I took my phone and turned it around real time, I could do it if you want me to, but you would see three screens plus the one I'm on with you. So that's four in this office going right now, right?
All right.
Different information. And I'm solely focused on this one here, but we're not lacking information today or
Mhm.
access to information, right? You could have tickers and news and open emails and dashboards and all sorts of things. So I think what a question is, what's going to serve the person best in the role related to the data that you're looking at, right? So that may be a different answer for different people based on their function, or maybe only a slice of the information that could be relevant. In my case, we created that dashboard that it would be weekly populated.
Mm.
So the information could be real time, but we created the dashboard, then we sent it out to the board and leadership on a weekly basis. And then the following call that would come after that, then we would be reflective back in those KPIs. I would suggest that daily, if you run an airline, is necessary,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
But in most businesses, you could probably get triggered and chase down a rabbit hole,
Right.
and you're winning the battle and losing the war. So yeah, I think the question is, what's going to help serve the person in that particular role to do their role more effectively and not be just a reporting tool that then is just a task that gets added on everything else that's done.
And here's a thought that I have, Jeff, and this is your bailiwick more than mine. So I'd love your thoughts about this. I have the sense that we don't want to just respond to the financial information. We want to be looking for the patterns. What is happening in our company or in our market with our clients that we can link to the changes that we're seeing in our financials. And when we can recognize those patterns, then perhaps it's time to take action.
I think you're seeing it well, Aaron. I think about if you look at, if you're the offensive coordinator of a football team, you're predominantly looking at the offense, right? So call that your VP of sales or marketing, right? And then, if you're the defensive coordinator, you're studying the offense, but in the context of your defense. So maybe that's your COO, right? Or VP of ops. The special teams, right? They're their own ecosystem themselves, right? And the reality is the role of the owner or the leader is to be the head coach that sometimes is in the tower. I'm a Don James fan and grew up with Husky football, and he was known for being in the tower and having great coordinators that would roll the information, but he could see the big picture. So I think you need to keep your eye on not just the dials that are easy to find or that everybody does, like what's my accounts receivable or what's the line of credit at, but what are the key indicators related to new customers or clients? What's in the funnel at a stage? Maybe it's in a certain business, it's your number of statements of work you send out or proposals, or that may not be the how many new customers did we get, but what's the leading indicators? How many new statements of work or proposals did we send out? Well, then how do you aggregate that information into that dashboard? So what you realize is the professionals you go to are going to have their own proclivity, but you as the business leader and owner need to be Don James in the stand. And so the finance person may say, well, here's all the 5 key finance metrics. And you need all 5 of these to really run the business well. But if I went to revenue, they're saying, well, here's 5 things here. And pretty soon you have a dashboard that has 15, 20 items on it. And so you got to parse that down to what is actionable.
I love that you brought up the term leading indicators, and in my experience working
Well, thank you.
with owners and other business leaders, the distinction between leading indicators and lagging indicators is incredibly important and incredibly valuable, and for a lot of folks really hard to understand. So we're not going to dig into that right now, but I suggest to all you folks at home, if leading indicators and lagging indicators aren't something that you are intimately familiar with, I suggest you go and look up that concept, because it's tremendously powerful.
Can I just one thought
Please.
on that? That's very simple. My good friend Doug Hall, that I think the world of, has done a lot of work using the book Traction, and that's the best book I've seen on that topic. So if you're trying to understand it and apply it, Traction lays it out in a way, and then Doug implements that in some other processes to help me say, what's in the rearview mirror, what's in the windshield.
Fantastic. I love that book, and I also love Doug. So that brings us to my second recommendation for you to boost company value while reducing the load on you. And it's going to be connected to my last suggestion, my suggestion that you push decision-making down. And this suggestion is that you let people fail. Now that sounds, I know I scared you, Jeff, with my last suggestion of pushing decision-making down. When you let people fail, you're going to incur a cost. Maybe they alienate a customer, or maybe they waste some money, or maybe they alienate another employee. There are lots of ways that they could fail. And as we talked about with my last suggestion, when people fail, they learn. We learn more from failing than we do from succeeding. And so I know that it is difficult, bordering on impossible, to watch some bit of value fall off a cliff through this mistake. So one of the ways that I find that it is very helpful for me to think about this in letting people fail is I think about it as tuition. What would I invest in order for this person on my team to gain this knowledge, to gain this insight, to gain the judgment that they're bound to gain by this failing? And if I would pay, let's call it $10,000 in tuition for them to learn this lesson, then maybe it's worth allowing them to make a $5,000 mistake. Well, that's cheap tuition. What do you think, Jeff?
So a friend of mine who was on the Seahawks, he was on the Legion of Boom, was telling me the story about Pete Carroll that I thought was super interesting. And he was in a defensive role. And he said that when he was put in for a certain play to perform a certain function, and I'm going to use protect against the pass, okay, in a kind of a short to mid yardage situation, which is where he was playing, then his job was to make sure that that pass was not complete. He said the interesting thing was, if they did a run and he didn't stop the run, Coach Carroll would never say anything questioning what he did.
How interesting, right? His job was to stop a pass, not necessarily to stop some offensive success, but very specifically to stop the pass.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting as I heard that. And it's not that Coach Carroll would say, well, let the guy run by if he's got the ball. Because if you know this defensive player who is all pro, you would realize, no, he was good in all those situations. But the point is, he said he really keyed in on what it was that you were there to do. And then to your failure point, though, maybe you failed against the run. He used that as an education to say, okay, now how can we have an and, not an or, right? But let's start with something we know you can do and do it well, and then start to allow you to exercise effort in something you're not as adept at. but you will grow into it, right? Because again, if we're growing leaders, to your first point, then I almost don't like the word failure because I don't think there's any such thing except if the business literally went out of business, right? If it just literally failed,
Yeah.
now it's a failure. But short of that, you probably don't have anything that should be considered a failure. You could say it's not successful or it didn't perform like we would like. But
Yeah.
even the mindset, because when you attach that word to it, then perhaps it causes us to push back against it just innately. So maybe if we just let that go and said, we've Thomas Edison, we figured out one more way the light bulb didn't work.
There you go.
Right?
I'm thinking right now, Jeff, of when I learned to ride a motorcycle, and my instructors, pointed out the various parts of the exhaust system and said, if you touch these, it's gonna hurt.
Ow.
Well, I took that to mind, but it wasn't until I touched one and burned myself that I really took it to heart. I touched
On
it
your
once and only
on,
once.
on your calf?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Don't do that
Just
again, right?
let my leg rest against that pipe for just a little too long,
Yeah.
and woo! I will not do that again.
There we go.
All right, Jeff, that takes us, I think, to your third suggestion, and I'm looking forward to hearing what it is.
And Aaron, as I'm going through these, I know they're commonsensical in some ways, yet I started our company from scratch. I came out of a career 20 years in a certain industry. I learned a few things, kind of speculated it was enough to start a company, built our company on that experience and so on. But there's so much I didn't know. I would say out of 10 things you need to know to run a business, I could probably do 2, maybe 3. There's 2 or 3 more I kind of could do, and there's others I was just not good at all. And when you're starting or building a company, some of those things get either left out or they're put on the shelf for a while. So no one does all these things well. I will say that, and yet can have a very successful company that can have wonderful exits and create value and legacy and serve their community and their employees, be great for the family. So you can be very successful and not do all these things. But these are all additive. And in my point is, in this case, increase EBITDA, EBITDA for those that don't know. And I don't need to get into what the acronym it really stands for as much as it's free cash flow. But for a few years, like 3 or 4, if someone wants an exit, it's important to be building the EBITDA, because in the common language that's going to be used in the acquirer's vocabulary is a multiple typically of some form of EBITDA, which can be different than other measures that an owner may use. And understanding what the components of EBITDA are and how to effectively run the business well while increasing EBITDA, not at the expense of one or the other, but running the business well while growing EBITDA, because there are very specific tranches of valuation that are given within certain bands of EBITDA, short of unicorn companies. So we can say, well, what's a, Chat GPT, what was their multiple? But short of the unicorns, that multiple of that number has these bands. And as you go from one band to the next, the multiple multiplies. And so the value can go up tremendously by managing accurately the drivers in the business that are going to probably be the indicator of what you're going to get when it's all said and done.
And so at a high level, Jeff, what are a few of the levers that business leaders can press or move in order to increase EBITDA without hurting the company's performance?
So there could be things, for example, like are you using a line of credit or do you have a longer term loan? Do I go the difference between maybe some equity investment versus a debt instrument and what that's going to do to the balance sheet? Certainly, as you look at equipment, and equipment could be everything from, trucks that are doing delivery to actual machinery that's making a product. And what are the terms of maybe a loan on that? So, for example, we saw a company that we ended up doing an acquisition. And well, I can say it. It's now called Moxie Manufacturing, and it's in Moxie, Washington, which is a thriving metropolis outside Yakima and a wonderful town, famous for their hops, by the way, grow more hops there than anywhere else in the world. So this
No
company,
kidding.
Moxie Manufacturing, yeah, literally number one hop producer in the world. Um, but if you were going to sell that company and you purchased a whole bunch of equipment and you used cash for it versus financing, which there's great reasons to use cash, but all of a sudden it can cause your company to look much less profitable.
Mm.
And if you sold the company and it's financed, the acquiring party is going to build that finance structure into their operation of it, right? So you're able to deflect some of that reduction into someone else, and it's built into the equation, and it's all ethical. Another thing could be looking at ordinary income or salaries and salary versus bonus, because again, when you're looking at an acquisition, then you're going to say, well, what salaries are we going to need to maintain
Mm.
in order to retain those employees? And if some were maybe on a variable component, then as a fixed overhead, that can change the ratios. So we could go on, but that's why
And
having someone who's a professional that knows this, that can help you figure out what those things are to do that. That's what we do when it's called One Accord Capital Advisors, but how to help prep a company so those things are done accurately and appropriately, ethically, for when someone's ready to do that.
beautiful. I'm about to give you my third suggestion. Before I do, let me just say again, for those of you who are with us live, feel free to chat with us. As Larry did earlier, we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. My third suggestion for how to build your company value while reducing the load on your shoulders is to grow through your employees, to think big about
Mm.
what your company might be because of the folks that you have working for you. And to illustrate this, I'll tell you a quick story that I heard from the celebrity chef Mario Batali. Mario had essentially achieved his dream. He wanted to have one successful restaurant in New York City. And he did. He had one successful restaurant in New York City.
Sure did.
And when you hear his story, he says that he woke up one morning thinking about his sous chef, which is his right-hand person in the restaurant. And he thought to himself, I have taught this guy everything that I can teach him.
Hmm.
And any moment now, he's either going to go and he's going to start his own restaurant, or he's going to go and find another chef who has things to teach him that I can't teach him. And he's going to be gone. And I will have lost this key part of my team. So instead of allowing any of that to happen, he expanded his notion of what his company could be. He bought a second restaurant and he gave his sous chef 50% equity and said, this is your restaurant to run. Go run it. Which sounds like a waste of money, right? It's like, oh, here, let me give you 50% equity in this thing that I just invested in. What it became was the beginning of an empire. And he retained this sous chef who works with him to this day, or at least did it at the time that I heard this story. If your company is one of those in which people feel as if there is no place to grow because everything is full,
Right.
well, then what about the things that don't exist yet? And is there a way to send the message to your key people that they can drive the growth and expansion of your company into
Mhm.
new service
Mhm.
offerings or new locations?
Mhm. Absolutely. Right. In that case, I would say, would you rather have 50% of something or 100% of nothing? Right.
There you
So,
go.
yeah, it depends on, is the glass half full or half empty? Maybe an attitude of plenty versus scarcity. And I think that's part of it, right? It's a belief that as we grow and develop people, that's going to bless them and as well as our business. Bringing the restaurant thing home, the Canlises, Chris and Alice are friends, but Mark and Brian are running the restaurant now. And I was with Brian, and he told me a story at the time, if I'm quoting it correctly, but I mean, he told it to me firsthand. He said there were 28 key people at the restaurant. Now, I don't know how many more employees total, but he said 28 that we've identified that are key. He goes, 21 of them I'm training to leave the business and compete or go somewhere else. He said, but I trust, based on an attitude of plenty, that we'll find other talent. And there's obviously many key people in this region that have come from Canlis, yet Canlis continues to thrive.
And Canlis, for those of you who maybe aren't here in the Seattle area, Canlis is the premier restaurant in Seattle.
Right.
I love that, and it reminds me of the kind of maybe it's a meme I think that I saw where the CFO says, "What if we train these? What if we invest in training for these people and they leave?" And the CEO responds, "What if we don't and they stay?"
I haven't seen that, but yeah, you want growth-minded people, right? And
There you
some
go.
of them are going to leave.
Yep. Wish them well, right? Go with God.
Well, and I think if you bless them, Aaron, you kind of leaned into this, and you're very strong in culture. And I'll make this simple. How does an owner do this, right? How do you figure this out? And to take an action that's easy to do, well, it's simple to do, maybe it's not easy, is to sit down with each key person and ask them, what do you want out of life? Describe to me what's 10 years from now look like for you. Ideally, everything goes well, or maybe it's 5.
Yeah.
And because my job, I think, as a leader is to help you get there. And I would hope that what we're doing here will help prepare you to be able to do that with us or somewhere else. But rather than me guessing, let me just listen, and you just take notes. What is it you want? And then I can start to correlate their role to where they want to be, right?
Can't agree with you more.
Yeah.
The person in my company who is who has dual role, right? She's our customer experience manager and is also my personal assistant. In our very first meeting, once she'd been hired, I asked her what her career aspirations are, and she wants to be the general manager of a 4 or 5-star hotel. So I'm doing whatever I can to help her develop the skills, develop the experience that are going to get her there. I know that I am training her to leave.
There you go. And therefore, when she's here, she's also going to put more into it because she knows you have her best interest at heart.
That's right. And that's and I feel good about everything that we're doing because I know that I'm working to support her dreams.
That's right.
All right.
I have a lot of alumni of One Accord that work in this region. Some that compete directly with us, not too many. But I've tried to bless them. And one of the questions is, when you're thinking about leaving, my question is, have you decided? And if they're like, no, I'm considering, my next question is, okay, could I pitch you? Yes or no? But I will only if there's something maybe that's coming down the pike that I know would be a benefit to them, right? Where I could say, hey, there's something I want you to know. You wouldn't know right now. And this is how it may fit in the plan you've told me you want. The other end, if they say no, I'm like, okay, I won't. But if they've decided to leave, the question I say is, how can I bless you? How can I help you actually take from what you've done here and be successful somewhere else? Our largest competitor for our Capital Advisors M&A practice is actually based out of Gig Harbor. And they're 2 very good friends who I trust, and they're remarkably good at what they do. And they got their start at One Accord in this practice area. we've actually referred business to each other. And when someone asks, of course, you're going to recommend your own company to do the work. Who else would you recommend? That's who I recommend. So, it's a mindset, right? And if you believe that you're helping people get out of life what they want, and you'll be happier and more successful in doing that, then it causes you to hold on a little less tightly, being willing to empower people and do what you said earlier and allow them to fail or figure ways that it doesn't work, however we want to call that.
There you go. Or fall down.
Yes.
Um, Folks, you know that I bring guests on to this show, Eight Ways To, whom I've gotten to know and whose businesses I've gotten to know. And I've gotten to know Jeff and a number of his colleagues at One Accord. And I really wholeheartedly believe in their expertise and in what my father would call their Menschlichkeit, right? They are really quality folks over there.
I love
Um,
that. Thank you.
you're welcome. I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. So,
Thank you.
Jeff, I'd love for you to take a moment before we get to your final suggestion and then to mine. Take a moment and tell the folks how and why they may want to get a hold of you and One Accord.
Well, how to get a hold of me, the easiest is you could go to our website was oneaccord, one word, .co.com. And through there is our contact information, and email is always simple just to reach out to me. And my wife would say I'm a bit OCD in getting back. And so I will get back to anybody that writes me. I connect on LinkedIn, but only those people that I've met in person. So anybody in my LinkedIn is actually someone I know, but I'd love to get to know you and be able to connect. And so that is the how. Now, I just want to make sure the second part, Aaron, that I'm addressing correctly. And that is, why would they get a hold of us?
Yeah, what problem or aspiration can you help people through?
So ours is very simple. We work with privately held companies that range, as I mentioned earlier, from 10 to 200 million. That's our sweet spot. And it's really where there's an owner that is exploring some form of transition, maybe growth, new markets, or the most easy to identify as an exit. And our experience is before you, especially you're going to transition leadership or ownership, 3 to 5 year window is the best way to do that. We can help someone if it's next week. And the uniqueness about One Accord is that we serve that market. And again, we've been really fortunate to work with over 450 privately held companies, 29 states, 9 countries. The bulk of the largest concentration in the Northwest, but the West Coast is very, very strong. And the uniqueness is, because we have these 3 legs of a stool, we don't only have kind of one set of lenses that we look through. And our job is to help the customer be, or the owner to be successful and define success for them. So if that's an M&A process, we're the best in the Northwest, but not the only, that can do that really well. On the other hand, 8 out of 10 historically and statistically aren't ready. And most M&A firms at that point have to turn them away. We have a separate company that can actually work with the owner, which are most of the topics we're talking about here, to actually be able to receive that value. 2 quick examples, if I might, and then
Please.
this will be kind of the why. First state only, so this is a public information on our website, but as a distributor of first aid kits that you see in businesses, churches, schools, the defibrillator and all of that. They had an offer to sell for a little over 4 million from someone in the same space back east. That buyer group felt they were a little owner dependent, and it was a little lower number than the owner would like. And we were able to put in sales and marketing expertise and finance expertise with some operations. And that company sold to the same buyer for over 14 million. So went from 4 million to 14 million in a year.
Let's emphasize same buyer.
Same buyer.
Awesome.
Yeah, and their point is they knew it would run well now, And their concern was they were discounting it because if you took that founder owner out, they really weren't sure was there. Similar situation, bigger company in Eastern Washington. And
Change the risk profile, change the value.
yep, yep. So the second one had two sets of cousins. So grandpa started it, two sons, each had two sons. So four of them working in the business, cousins, $60 million offer. Again, a nice, that's a significant amount of money for the family. But it was fairly owner dependent. So the majority of that money was going to be in what's called an earnout. They wouldn't get it up front. They would get it over time based on performance. It changed. That was about a 2-year process working there to over $100 million deal with basically all up front. So it went up, but it also, in terms of net at the time of sale, changed significantly. And that was putting in really people, process, and system, ERP, putting in the right accounting system, the right people to run it. And so it was running very effectively. Obviously, the value went up. So that's the why, increasing value.
So if you'd like some folks to really help you boost the value of your company, One Accord, they're your folks.
Well, we'd be honored to speak to them, at least have a conversation, right?
There you go.
Yes.
All right. So Jeff, I'm now going to come to you for your fourth and final suggestion about how business leaders can boost their company value while reducing the load on their shoulders.
So that is really reducing either segment or customer concentration. And so that involves either finding other customers that are in the same segment that can then diversify the client mix, or even moving into a new segment. And a simple example that we would see around here, and you could use it for multiple industries, but someone that's in the Boeing supply chain, and everybody every part that they manufacture goes into Boeing or one of their suppliers. And so diversifying into other, be it aerospace, or in a case of one of the companies we worked with, they moved into marine. So they were already doing manufacturing. They wanted to stay in the Northwest in terms of focus. And so they started developing a marine line of product that they could then segment and customer wise diversify. So that, can be a couple year process to be able to do that. And by the way, it doesn't have to be massively profitable, because if you think about an acquirer, generally what they're doing is they're looking at what the business can be, not where it is today. So if you've already opened up a new channel, a new segment, new customer base, even if it's not a large percentage yet, but you've already shown some traction, then your value is going to go up. It's also going to help the owner probably sleep better, knowing it's not so dependent in a certain sector. And given what we came through with COVID, we saw some sectors really get, hammered. We saw others really thrive. It was more acute than normal market, but that diversification helps us all sleep a little better as well, and maybe remove the burden from a key segment. So that would be number 4 on my book.
I love that suggestion. And I think, Jeff, one way to do this is, if you do have concentration in a particular segment, to look at what do those folks have in common, who are your clients.
That's right.
And in what other segments can you find people who have those same commonalities?
That's right.
I was working last week, no, 2 weeks ago. I was with a group of CEOs and business owners on what it takes to cultivate an innovation and problem-solving culture. And we learned that this one electrical engineering firm really specializes in water treatment. And they're in Hawaii, in Honolulu. So water treatment, wastewater management is incredibly important there.
Okay.
And they have a specialty in wastewater management. And so when we dug into what is it about wastewater management that requires a specialty from an electrical engineering perspective, he said, well, there are all these redundancies that are required to make sure that the power never goes down. generators, batteries, backup systems, and switching components, the automatic switching components, which led us to the question, well, who else needs to have the power never go down? And so then we ended up talking about hospitals and other kinds of industries where the power has to never go down. And his mind about where their specialty can lead them, was just blown wide open.
Nice job. Way to serve, right? Typically, most companies, if we reflect on it, started with the person that knew a certain segment, and they either had a service that they knew in the segment or a product or part that they built in that segment. And so that's where they ended up. Just as an analogy, I was talking with one of our three daughters about this, that there was a company years ago that really should have been Amazon. And when I grew up, they owned the market, and every Christmas they had a big catalog that came out, and everybody knew it was the Sears catalog with a really thin paper because it had tens of
Yep.
thousands of items, right? And they had
Yep.
distribution in warehouses. You already had customers ordering literally through it and delivering, right? You had a mass variety of different items, and yet where is Sears today? And right?
Yeah, indeed. Where indeed. Yep. Same kind of thing with Kodak. You and I, we grew up,
Yeah,
we as soon as we saw that K, we knew exactly what it was. And my
that's right.
9-year-old daughter has no idea. If I were to say the word Kodak, she would just look at me funny.
That's right. And if I understand correctly, the engineer that basically developed digital photography was actually at Kodak.
At Kodak, and they said
Yeah.
that's not relevant, and they put it on a shelf, leased the technology to other people, and that technology essentially put them out of business.
Yeah. So interesting.
All right. That leads me to telling you folks some of the reasons you might get a hold of me. I'm the only Aaron Schmuckler on LinkedIn, so I'm not hard to find. Feel free to reach out to me here on LinkedIn. Email me, aaron@theyesworks.com. We do company culture engineering. And so if you ever find yourself as a business leader saying, why are my people doing X? Why are my people leaving? Why are my people not more accountable? Why are my people so awesome? And how do I keep it this way as we grow and develop and hire new people? Then I wholeheartedly welcome a call from you. I'd love to just chat and learn what I might be able to do, what insight I might be able to provide that would help you along. And I'll also let you know that we have our managers upskilling sprint, one of 2 cohorts that we are running in the fall through September is already sold out. So we've got a couple of spots left in the other cohort. This is a bare bones system of management, how to drive performance with compassion and heart, so that you can thrive as a company and have people thriving while they build the company that you are. My final suggestion for you about how to drive your company's value up while driving the burden on you down. My final suggestion is that every single person in your company is a sales rep.
Amen.
That there's nobody like the folks in your company, whether they are actually being paid to sell or whether they're sweeping the floors. There's nobody who is more intimate with what you do, with the value that you provide to the community and to your customers, with the values that you have and that you espouse and that you embody in your company. There's nobody who's more intimate with those things than the folks who draw a paycheck from you. And we all know people. And when you really instill in your people the idea that you'd like them to be ambassadors for your company, you'd like them to keep their eyes open for opportunities for themselves to communicate about the value that you as a company can provide, or even just keep their eyes open for opportunities to direct your salespeople toward, then your company is a selling machine. and
That's
you
right.
have all the leverage of all the people in your company.
Amen. That is so well said. By the way, Aaron, just to affirm you in that, the second client I worked with, which is a technology firm that then had a wonderful exit, they had about 65 employees, and they were a technology firm developing SaaS models for enterprise level companies. And I asked them how many sales people they had, and they said one. And I said to
Yeah.
the CEO, what if we could develop 65?
Ooh, right. 65 is so much, it's a much, much bigger number than one.
Yeah, and if everybody did a little bit and was equipped and trained within their own comfort zone, which is what happened,
Yeah.
because we started to help developers say, well, are you ever on a soccer field with your kids, or are you at a church, or are you part of the arts or whatever? And they're like, oh, and do any of those people that you work with work at any of the following companies? They're like, well, yeah, my friends
Yeah.
work here and there. Okay, here's what you could say that would lead to a simple introduction. Then they created a little bonus structure that everybody could participate, and versus one person trying to carry the burden of 65 employees. So I'm with you. And that led
Fantastic.
to diversified risk. So a potential acquirer now looked and said, hey, your whole team's equipped to do this. We know it's going to continue. And they got a great exit.
I bet they did. Well, Jeff, I want to, on my own behalf and on behalf of everybody who is currently watching or may watch later, I want to express my gratitude for your joining us and sharing your insight and your wisdom with us.
It's an honor. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank you, those of you at home who have been hanging out with us for this hour to learn. Just, I hope if even one of these things helps you boost your company's value while reducing the burden on you, then I will consider our job to have been very well done.
That's well done.
Thanks again, Jeff. I look forward to our next encounter.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye all. And I don't know if you've got a stop switch over there, but mine has disappeared. So we are still live for the moment.